Now, in the past hour, two Just Stop Oil protesters who scaled a bridge on the Dartford crossing, forcing police to close it to traffic last October, they've been jailed for 3 years and 2 years and 7 months for causing a public nuisance. Now, the news comes on the first of 4 days of climate protests by Extinction, Rebellion and other groups, including Just Stop Oil. Well, the environmental campaigners claim up to 50,000 people are heading to London to set out climate demands. And Sky's Thomas Moore is in central London. He's with them. Thomas, how's the atmosphere?
Yeah, look, they're quite buoyant, actually. I don't think they've got the numbers down here yet that they would have been hoping for. They were looking at perhaps 30,000 or more coming down, but it has been quite rainy today, so that would probably taken a few off the crowds. But it is 4 days of activity that they're going to have down here, and he's under the banner of Unite to Survive. They do believe that the action from Parliament doesn't reflect the urgency that we're hearing from UN climate scientists, and that's why they're coming back on the streets after a 4-month pause, and this time with, as you say, 200 different organisations and bodies, including the Quakers and Keep Britain Tidy. So it's beyond the hardcore environmental activists. So I'm joined by a few, Esme and Amis. I mean, you are at school in North Wales. Why have you come down here? What is concerning you about the action from the politicians behind us?
I think it's the fact that they're not doing enough, and they're not showing enough urgency to a problem that's clearly affecting us now, not in the future. Something needs to be done now, not in 10 years' time, not in 30 years' time. It needs to happen now.
Amis, what about you?
Yeah, I feel the same. It's just they're not doing anything. They're just lying to us and then not taking action on their words.
And does that worry? Because you're not yet old enough to vote.
No.
Is this a way of having your voices heard?
Yes, this is one way to voice a disappointment. But it's really great to see everybody come together to see people who share the same mindset as us.
And what is it about the science that does worry you?
It's just the long-term effects. It's not one thing. It's just so many effects. It's affecting animals. It's affecting humanity. It's an effect that will affect every single one of us. And it's the fact that people don't seem to care, and they put their greed above really the care for.
If it doesn't affect people initially, then they won't believe the science that it will happen in long term.
That's brilliant. We are actually joined by a scientist. Beth, I mean, you're a lecturer at the University of Westminster.
Yes.
Tell us, what does the science say about climate change?
Well, actually, the science has been very clear for decades that human activity causing climate change is not only leading to increased global temperatures and increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, loss of habitats and risking human civilization actually now. Not only has that been clear for decades, but what's become clear within probably the last 10 years or so is that the trajectory that we're on is actually accelerating far beyond predictions. There's a real urgency to act now, and that's what's not happening.
The government would say, well, the UK has cut its carbon emissions by almost half, that we are amongst the leading nations in the world. Is that how you would read it as well?
The UK may say that, but they may like to, for a full picture, add that they're also still exploring new oil and gas fields, licensing new oil and gas fields.
Is that compatible then with the 1.5 degree target of warming?
Absolutely not. There's a huge gap between the promises, our current habit, and even below the promises, what would be required to achieve the targets set by things like the IPCC and scientific bodies who say what would be necessary to limit the impact.
So do you think that moments like this, I mean, it's a long time since Extinction Rebellion have been out on the streets, does this bring people together in a way that hasn't been seen in a long time then?
I really hope so. I think one of the strengths of this kind of demonstration is that it's not about disrupting public lives. It's
but
about
the roads
targeting.
Are closed, Beth. I know for anybody trying to move through central London
it's
today.
It's true, but they will also be closed on Sunday for the London Marathon. And this isn't primarily a disruptive activity. We've been visiting various government departments and presenting ultimately the demand that the government stops new fossil fuel. And that it considers that the current model of government is clearly not working. We've just heard from young people who don't have a voice in that government, who can see that we're being let down. It's a corrupt system. We need a citizens' assembly. We need people to be able to make these decisions that politicians are too afraid to, because they won't get in a few years' time if they do.
But the reality, I guess, is that we can't switch off the fossil fuel tap as of tomorrow, because that's how the economy runs. How do people get around? Even our buses run on fossil fuels. So there is that element of reality versus the hope, I suppose.
Oh, it's absolutely true that overnight we can't make that switch. But what we can stop doing is investing in new fossil fuels, and that's what the government is failing to do. They're licensing new oil and gas fields and exploring. It was only very recently we had that comment about draining the North Sea for all its potential in fossil fuels, and that is utterly incompatible. Aside from the impossibility of an overnight switch, we're not talking about that. We're talking about them actively exploring to expand fossil fuels.
Beth, thank you very much indeed, and thank you to the two of you as well. So there's 4 days of action. Tomorrow, Earth Day. Sunday, the London Marathon. Then on Monday, the groups down here are hoping that the politicians will respond. They've given until 5 o'clock as a deadline for them to come up with some kind of plan on how they will be stepping away from fossil fuels.
Thank you very much indeed. Thomas Moore there at the climate change protests. We've seen Thomas getting, I think, gradually more happier throughout the day as the weather's improved. So let's check on how things are shaping up when it comes to the weather this weekend.